In episode 8, John and Quiet are making their way back to New San Francisco. They're discussing their new life, and then Quiet, who's driving, finds the picture, the only thing that John Doe has to his past. Now, you might be wondering why exactly it is that he doesn't remember anything. It's because he was in a car accident when he was a little kid. It was right after the world basically ended, and because of it, he doesn't remember anything. He just woke up on the road alone. And on top of it, somebody ended up stealing his car. So he was probably about 9 or 10, all alone and scared. That's when he wandered into the forest and he found Evelyn. Evelyn was some dead guy's car. Some guy that had a whole lot of money. Young John Doe decided to use that money as kindling, creating a fire with it. But eventually, he actually had to drive off because people were coming and he didn't want to stick around and find out what exactly they wanted. So that's when a 10-year-old John Doe became the driver of Evelyn. The only two things he had to his name were the picture and the car. Because of this, it was a big step for John to let Quiet drive Evelyn. But now that she's found the picture, it's just too much for him. She starts telling him how she can handle holding a simple picture, but then it flies out of the window. Immediately, they turn the car to the side of the road and they start looking for it. And they do find it, but holy men find them. Although the holy men don't really care about them, they care about the car. While John and Quiet were looking for the picture, the holy men decided to steal their car. For the first time since they met, John doesn't feel like talking. He is furious at Quiet. And she can tell. She feels really bad about what happened. Eventually, he does tell her that this isn't the first time he's lost Evelyn. He's gotten carjacked before. He's just flat out lost the vehicle before, but every time Evelyn's come back to him. He's confident this time will be no different. But in order to get Evelyn back, he needs to do something that is crazy. He needs to follow those church bells and get to the holy men. By nightfall, they reach the location where the holy men are gathered. They kill 2 holy men stealing their mass, and they're hoping that they can just waltz in, blend in, get the car back, and get the hell out of there before anything happens. It's going to be a little bit difficult, though, since Quiet is a girl, and these are the holy men. They realize just how difficult it actually is going to be when they waltz into the gathering. They are surrounded by crazy dudes, all en masse, all drugged out, all killers. The only women that are there are dominatrixes. But initially, when they walk in, nobody bats an eye. They just assume that they are a part of the holy men. The first interaction they have is with a woman, but it's a dominatrix. Yeah, the holy men kind of have every kink category covered, which is really inclusive of them. But the dominatrix starts talking to Quiet, and she has to behave herself, deepening her voice and just going with the flow so that she doesn't blow their cover. Because they behave themselves, they end up getting handed 2 glasses. It's Jack and Coke, but the Coke isn't Coca-Cola, it's actually cocaine. And now they have to worry about that Coke high, which starts kicking in pretty quickly. As this is happening, the leader of the holy men shows up. His name is Preacher. And he's named that because before the Great Fall, he actually was a preacher. But when everything happened, he realized that God didn't care about them. So he started this kind of murderous sex cult thing. It's weird, but the dude's got followers. He starts addressing everybody there, welcoming to their annual gathering. The Rocky Mountain, I don't want to lose my monetization, but everybody's banging each other, festival. As he's getting the crowd riled up, John Doe and Quiet are looking around for Evelyn. Evelyn, though, is the crown jewel. Most of the holy men have to make offerings to Preacher. And one particular holy man's offering is Evelyn, and it really catches his eye. Everybody walks up to Evelyn and surrounds the car, and the Preacher, he's turned on. To this point, John Doe is behaving himself. He's keeping it together. But when Preacher starts discussing having sex with Evelyn, that's just a line too far. He blows his cover by yelling at the Preacher to get his hands off of her. But it's not a fully blown cover. The Preacher just figures that this member of the Brotherhood simply wants the car. John's pretty convinced that he could take the Preacher in a fight. So he proposes a duel to the death, where the winner ends up getting the car. It's understandable why John would think this. The Preacher is some scrawny, squirrely dude that looks like he's never been in a fight in his life. And John Doe's been on the run since he was 10 years old, having to handle himself. This seems like really lopsided odds in John Doe's favor. But I don't know if before the fall the preacher took Taekwondo lessons or after the fall he collected all the UFC DVDs and took notes. This dude is a savage. John finds out real quickly that this isn't going to be the cakewalk he thought. Maybe one of the reasons why is because the preacher is so coked up. The preacher is tuning up John Doe, and Quiet realizes she has to do something about it before John ends up dying. She's able to sneak off, take off her mask, and pretend to be one of the dominatrixes to some unassuming member of the Brotherhood, commanding this guy to give her the keys to a van. He's a little resistant on it, so she ends up having to take matters in her own hands and kills him, but she gets the keys. When Quiet returns back to the fight, John Doe isn't dead yet. He's chained up. He's going to be the next sacrifice. He's lost the fight, and the preacher is just celebrating his victory. But the preacher wasn't banking on the fact that John Doe had backup in the form of Quiet. They're outmanned, they're outgunned, they need to get out of there. But when Quiet tells John, I got us some wheels, we can leave, John looks at her and says, I'm not leaving Evelyn. Quiet is mystified as to how the hell John Doe can walk back in there trying to get his car, and John says, you don't get it. And Quiet scoffs at it, saying, you're right, I don't. But what I do know is I've gotten whipped, I've drank Coke, I've bled, all for you in this car. And now you say I don't get it? John simply says, I'm not leaving Evelyn. And Quiet tells him, well, I'm not dying for a car. They then have to decide what they're going to do, because the holy men have realized that the van was taken. Quiet tells John, we got to leave now. But John says, no, go. I told you I'm not leaving Evelyn. Completely shocked, Quiet turns around and tries to save herself. John Doe turns in the opposite direction, trying to save Evelyn. John tries to get his car back, but the preacher is still there, guarding it. He has a lot less people around him this time because they're all trying to seal the gates, but still, he's too much for John Doe. He's about to stab John Doe, ending his life, and that's when Evelyn makes the ultimate sacrifice. Because in their fighting, the preacher stabbed Evelyn's gas tank, which started leaking gas. The gas caught fire, the fire quickly went to Evelyn, and she exploded. From afar, Quiet sees this, having escaped, and she starts crying. She thinks that there's no way John had survived the explosion. But he did. He stumbles up to the burned-out carcass of his friend, really his best friend, and he quickly mourns her loss. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.